And that's what Mosiah is trying to figure out, is how do you move forward in a way that can guarantee to a higher degree of certainty that wise, honorable, inspired people aren't going to be replaced by prideful, sinful, iniquitous people. Look at verse 18. Yea, remember King Noah, his wickedness and his abominations, and also the wickedness and abominations of his people. Behold, what great destruction did come upon them, and also because of their iniquities they were brought into bondage. So, again, just to really quickly recap here, Mosiah wasn't born yesterday. He understands the complexities of this. He's been the king for 30 years. He knows what a king goes through and the struggles and the decisions that need to be made. And he knows his history, not just of the Book of Mormon times, but of looking at King Saul, King David, King Solomon. None of those ended well. Then when Israel split into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, you've got dozens of kings between those two kingdoms, and only a small percentage of them turned out to be what you would consider a good king. So he's saying, look, in the probabilities, he's establishing a case to say, we need to let God be our king, and let's come up with a government system that is actually the opposite flow of what happened in the Old Testament. So he's like, we're going to go from the reigns of the kings the opposite direction and begin the reigns of the judges, flipping what happened in the Old Testament. So look at verse 25. This is the key, verse 25 and 26. Therefore, choose you by the voice of this people judges, that ye may be judged according to the laws which have been given to you by our fathers, which are correct, and which were given them by the hand of the Lord. So you can see his new proposal. It's really quite simple. God gave laws to the kings that were righteous, so he's referring mostly to King Benjamin and Mosiah, his grandfather. And he's not saying this, he's being very, very humble. But the reality is Mosiah has been an amazing king. He's not going to tell you that, but I will. 30 years of incredible seership. He's a seer and a king and a prophet. He's all of these things, amazing. And he's saying, look, we've got really good laws. And back then, there is no separation of church and state, right? It's the law of Moses and these directions that have been given to him. That is their law. And he says, so we're going to give these now to judges. And all they're going to do is judge the people according to how they live these incredible laws that have been given by God. It's pretty simple. The key word here is voice of the people. In verse 25, you could mark it, by the voice of this people. Look at verse 26. Now it is not common that the voice of the people desireth anything contrary to that which is right, but it is common for the lesser part of the people to desire that which is not right. Therefore, this shall ye observe and make it your law, to do your business by the voice of the people. So it's a really profound thing when you say you have power in the masses of these people to decide who your judges are going to be and what's going to happen. So he gives you the scenario of, so what happens if the voice of the people chooses iniquity? What if more people want bad laws and we want to change the laws or change the form of government? He tells you, well, at that time, God's going to deliver you to destruction. You're going to have consequences for those choices. This introduces for us one of the most profound aspects of all of our very existence, which is this notion of agency and accountability. What he's doing here, for those of you who aren't very interested in politics or aren't really into the government kinds of things, like it or not, this is a part of our entire existence, our life, going clear back to heaven. Satan's attack was seeking to destroy the agency of man. He's trying to overthrow, he's trying to get people to vote or to change the way they see God and shift their focus to himself. It's everything in leadership, everything in kingship is either trying to emulate the devil to one degree or another, or trying to emulate the Savior to one degree or another. And there's no perfect analogy. But the point is, righteous kings act like Christ. Unrighteous kings act like the devil. And the devil takes agency from the people and takes it to himself. Christ gives more. What is a synonym for agency? Liberty, freedom. And he gives it out to the people to be able to make choices, but that then they have to be accountable for them. This is clearly laid out here. Now look at verse 38. Therefore, they relinquished their desire for a king and became exceedingly anxious that every man should have an equal chance throughout all the land. Yea, and every man expressed their willingness to answer for his own sins. One of Satan's lies and one of his greatest deceptions is that freedom is the ability to just do whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want, however you want, and with whomever you want. That's freedom. That's liberty. But he'll never tell you about the accountability that's attached to those choices, because that's how he binds us. That's how he actually takes away our agency. And so we live in a world that says things like, we don't need organized religion, we don't need laws, we don't need commandments. God isn't doing things. Just eat, drink, and be merry. Let's live it up. That's freedom. If you want to talk about freedom, go interview people who were in maximum security prison and ask them what it was like to enjoy that do whatever you want mentality. And now, how much freedom do you have? Elder D. Todd Christofferson wrote a great article years ago in the Ensign called Moral Agency. And in there, he has a really profound statement. He says, if you want more freedom, if you want more agency, if you want more liberty, learn as many of God's laws as you can and keep them. That's how you get more freedom. Jesus is the ultimate example of freedom, of power, of agency. All of these things that people seek, and yet they seek it in the wrong direction. Follow Christ, and what you'll do is keep to the best of your ability as many of God's laws as you can, which leads to more and more freedom. And you're not afraid of the accountability aspect. So here's this grand shift. We're no longer going to have a king telling you what to do. You're going to tell the government what to do in this context. Which in the U.S., people get so concerned about who's in the White House. And if we're not careful, we'll be more concerned about who's in the White House than who's in my house. And the reality is, brothers and sisters, it doesn't matter where you live in the world. It doesn't matter what form of government you live under. As members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we're taught to be law-abiding, peacekeeping, wherever possible, citizens who contribute to our societies. And it matters far less, in a U.S. context, it matters far less who's in the White House than who's in my house. And the connections that my house is making to God in this context. To say, I'm going to see God as my king, and I don't have to wonder if he's going to win the election this year in my house. Because as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now that doesn't mean we ignore government and our civic responsibilities. If King Mosiah were here, I think he would look at us and say, get involved. Let your voice be heard. If you live in a country or in a society where you have the capacity to vote, vote. Be involved in peaceful, reasonable, meaningful ways in your government.